Chapter 29. When Gustavo and Dan came down the next morning to have breakfast, they stopped at the door of the restaurant before going to their usual table. "Who's that guy?" Gustavo asked, nodding towards the fellow. A smile drew on Dan's lips. "That's Chippewa," he replied. "You sure? He doesn't look like him." "I'm sure, Gustavo. Come on, I'll explain," Dan said, leading the way to their table.
"Good morning. Have you slept well?"
Chippewa asked, sipping on his coffee. "Yeah, thanks, and good morning to you too," Gustavo replied, taking a seat beside the dream maker. "Morning," Dan rejoined, sitting down across from Chippewa and pouring himself and Gustavo some coffee. "I guess we're at the end of our journey. Is that the reason you've regained your original appearance?"
"Quite right you are, Dan,"
Chippewa said, turning to Gustavo.
"I'm sorry for not taking the time to explain my subterfuge sooner, but it wasn't appropriate for me to show you my true colours, as they say, before the time had come for you to leave your past, Dan."
He paused as if gathering his thoughts before he added,
"As you probably know, the Chippewa Indians are one of the largest Native American groups in North America. We could be found in states such as Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan. Additionally, a few of my bands inhabit parts of southern Canada. Together, they are approximately 150 different bands or groups of Chippewa Native Americans."
He chuckled and crossed his arms over his chest, obviously satisfied with his little spiel. In fact, Chippewa was now unrecognizable to the two men. He was dressed in his traditional attire, with an elaborate embroidered shirt, around which he wore a delicate woven scarf. A leather vest, linen pants and soft leather moccasins on his feet completed his apparel. But what was perhaps the most striking difference between the man they knew and the one sitting with them now was his long black hair and his face. His facial features were distinctive of the ancient Chippewa tribes. An aquiline nose, square jawline, and deep-set eyes reflected the intelligence resting in this man's soul. "It's amazing," Gustavo said, unable to turn his eyes away from the old man's profile. "But why couldn't you be showing yourself the way you are during our trip?"
"Just remember one thing, Gustavo. I am the dream maker. It is not my calling to help man make his dream come true. In so doing, the person I guide or influence in his or her decision cannot be distracted by my appearance or history. I have to blend in, as they say."
He raised his gaze to Dan.
"As you recall, some time ago when we were travelling on that wretched sampan near the coast of Java, I first appeared to you as an old seafarer. That's the way it had to be. If I had appeared to you the way I am today, perhaps you would have been distracted from our goal, which was to weather the storm, right?"
"Yes, Chippewa, that's right, but you would have been a welcome sight in whatever dress you appeared."
"You really think so?"
Chippewa asked, cocking his head to the one side.
"You are so shocked to see me already, you let go of the rubber and almost had the boat capsized on us."
Dan chuckled lightly. "You're right. When Malou told me that you were the dream catcher, I couldn't believe it." "Hold on a little minute," Gustavo interrupted. "What's the difference between a dream catcher and a dream maker?"
"Ah, yes, that's a question a few people ask when they first go on a trip into their past. Although I am one of the same person, my tasks vary, depending on the people I have the pleasure to escort. You see, Gustavo, when you first take a trip into your past, you dream or you relive or you imagine what you did. Yet some of those dreams could soon become nightmares, and that's where I come in. I catch the bad dream through an amulet similar to the one Dan is wearing, and only let the person imagine or relive the good dreams."
"But what about Dan's accident? You let him relive that event while he went down his first trip through his past. Couldn't you have stopped it?"
"No, Gustavo, because this particular event did in fact happen. It was not a dream or a nightmare, or even an imagining on Dan's part. It was an actual event."
"And what about the dream maker then?"
"Well, as the title implies, my task in that instance is to make the dream come true, or at least help the person worthy of receiving such assistance in making his or her dream come true."
"That's quite something," Gustavo remarked pensively.
"And when I was alive, my mother called me Dream Maker soon after my birth because, she told me later, I had made her dream to have a baby boy come true."
Dan had listened attentively to Chippewa's story and explanation, but now he said, "How about some breakfast?" smiling to his companions. Chippewa burst out laughing.
"I have endeavoured to curb Dan's impatience during our journey," he said to Gustavo, "but it seems as if I have failed in that regard, don't you think?"
"It's not a matter of impatience," Dan countered, getting to his feet. "I'm just hungry, that's all." Soon after they moored the cruiser at the Key West Marina, Gabby asked, "Can we go to that clearing now? Do you think Dad and Daniel are there already?"
"No, not yet, dear girl," Damianos replied. "They'll be there in the morning."
"You mean we've got to spend one more night aboard?"
"Yes, Gabby,"
Malou replied firmly. Or maybe you'd like to spend a night alone in the park, Stefano rejoined, sniggering. But aren't you impatient to see Dad and Daniel? Oh yes, we all are, Gabby, but we've travelled so far and for so long now that one more night will make no difference, will it? But Mum... Enough, Gabby. Malou sounded irritated. We will see both of them in the morning. Remember, all in God's time. I should have thought you would have enough sense to abide by his command by now. Okay, Gabby said in a huff, and going down the stairs. Do you want me to prepare something for dinner? She called over her shoulder. I'll be down in a minute, Malou replied. Just start boiling some water for the spaghetti. I'll get the salad started when I get down, okay? No problem, Mum, Gabby shouted back. A half an hour later, Stefano, Gabby and Damianos were sitting around the table while Malou was putting the finishing touches to the spaghetti sauce which she had prepared earlier that day. Damianos waited patiently for Malou to join them and for their plates to be served before he said,
I think you realize that it will be our last meal together.
What about breakfast tomorrow? Stefano put in, twirling a fork full of spaghetti in his spoon.
Maybe it will be a bite on the run, Damianos replied, smiling. But for tonight, let's gather our thoughts and remember what you will need to do tomorrow.
He paused and looked around the table.
The first thing to realize, Gabby and Stefano, is that your father will appear to you as he was 7 years ago, not as he will be when you return to Pahokee.
What about Daniel? Will he be 13 or 14 again like he was in 2007? Gabby asked.
No, he will be the 20-year-old who left the cruiser by mistake a few years back, Damiano said.
And we'll have to remember to hold hands, Malou put in after she swallowed a mouthful of salad. I'm not likely to forget that one, Gabby said. After seeing what happened to Dad, I'll be hanging on tight to you. She shot a glance to Stefano, and Mum for sure.
That's good, Damianos added. And the other important thing is to be sure to wear your amulet, your dream catcher, okay?
Instantly, the children and their mother looked down at the little amulet still hanging around their necks. Anything else? Malou asked, returning her gaze to Damianos.
Yes, you'll meet the people who have helped both Daniel and your father in their journey. They have been instrumental in ensuring their safety. God owes them a debt of gratitude.
Who are they? Stefano asked.
Well, first you'll meet Nicholas. He is one of God's messengers and the one who found your father when he fell in the clearing.
Is he an angel like Damien, then?
Malou asked. No, my dear, his mission is generally to convey God's message to the ones who need to listen.
And who else? Gabby asked, munching on a piece of bread.
Gustavo, the man who accompanied Daniel to Iran and who is due to join you in your trip back to 2014.
Why? Stefano asked. I thought he was just Dad's friend when he was in Key West.
Yes, he was. I can't readily recall if I told you already, but Gustavo chose to accompany your dad in his travel to the future.
Doesn't he have a family of his own?
No, Malou, he doesn't, unfortunately. He needed rescuing from a dismal future, and probably death, if your husband hadn't helped him.
Typical of Dad, Gabby piped up. He's always there when someone needs help, isn't he? She looked around the table. Yes, he is, that's for sure, Stefano agreed. Anyone else?
Oh, yes, and that's perhaps a person that you will need to remember always.
Who's that? Why should we remember him?
The reason you're sitting right here and why we were able to travel comfortably aboard this cruiser is because it belonged to his family.
You mean Destiny was his boat? Gabby asked, surprised. But I thought you said it belonged to a couple who wanted to revisit the site in World War II where their own parents died.
Yes, you're right, Gabby. It belonged to that couple, yes, but when Billy, that's the man's name, had no more money to maintain it, he sold it for scrap. Yet God knew that the reason Billy didn't or doesn't have money even today is because he gives it to the people in the shelter near his place.
Was that the same place where Dan and Gustavo stayed by any chance?
Yes, Malou, it was, and Billy knew he needed help in his kitchen. He owns a pizza shop, by the way, and the day Daniel lost himself, Billy put a wanted ad in the window of his restaurant.
You mean everyone is linked somehow?
Yes, Stefano, Billy owned Destiny, which allowed us to find our way back to your dad. Billy made charitable donations to the shelter where your dad found refuge. Nicholas was sent to Gustavo and your dad to lead them out of the shelter and toward your dad regaining his memory. Gustavo was able to accompany your dad and help him toward his travels. Ultimately, Billy took Daniel home to help him wait for you, and the last but not least, you'll meet the Dream Maker.
Really? The one that guided Dad to his future? Gabby explained a little louder than she wanted to.
Exactly. So you see, these men have come full circle with us in accomplishing God's will, and it's only fitting that we meet and greet them before we leave.
That's extraordinary, Malou said, putting her fork down. And you're saying that Billy has watched over Daniel all this time?
Yes, my dear, Damianos replied, but Daniel in turn has played a big role in Billy's life.
How do you mean?
Well, before Daniel came into the picture, Billy was lonely and didn't know how to close the gap between him and his son. Daniel showed him how, so it's now a simple matter for father and son to meet again."
"That's splendid," Malou said. "Maybe this whole trip was a huge blessing in disguise after all."